Today, inshallah, as we are just about to go into 2025. I thought it would be good for us to be able to reflect upon um, the past year and to think about the goals that we want to set ourselves for 2025, inshallah. I'm sure that some of you have already done it, but if you haven't done so, then this is an opportunity for you to think about it and perhaps to put some things into action, inshallah. And to begin this presentation, I wanted for us to reflect upon ayah of the Quran from Surah Al-Hashr, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu attaqullah wal tanzur nafsum ma qaddamat lighad wattaqullah inna Allaha khabirum bima ta'malun. And this is an important ayah of the Quran, in where Allah says that firstly He addresses the believers by asking them to inculcate within themselves that quality of taqwa, or that sense of consciousness of Him. And beyond that, that they should plan, prepare, they should look forth what they have done for the morrow, for Ghad, for the morrow. And the morrow here can mean a number of different things. It can be, a moment, a day, a time, a week, an hour that has not yet arrived, or it could also refer to the next life, to the hereafter. And this eye is important because it tells us about the need for us to be able to take stock to ensure that we have taqwa as something which is there in all different aspects of our life, and that we should be thinking strategically about how we do things, because only in this way will we be able to be as productive as we would like and achieve the goals that we have set ourselves, inshallah. Um, and the way I'm going to go and look at this presentation is that I'm going to look at a number of different things. In the first part of it, I am going to look at this whole area of what is known as auditing of your year. And then we're going to look at this whole area of what is known as goal setting. I know someone post something on the chat. I think it was Sister Mariam, which is good. But we'll be looking at that, and then we want to look at some of the reasons why people they fail in achieving the goals that they have set for themselves. And we know that this time of the year is also a very important time because there are so many people who set goals for themselves, but yet in so doing, they don't really achieve their goals. And the question is why? And we want to look at some of the science, inshallah, to be able to reflect on this, understand why people may not achieve what they want to achieve. Now, in the first part, I wanted to look at this whole area of auditing of the year. And this is the beginning in the process of trying to plan. Unless you're able to audit, unless you're able to take stock of your year, then it's very difficult to understand what you want to be able to do and whether or not you'll be successful or not. And the way to begin that process of taking stock of the year is to be able to think about the last 12 months and to think about some of the highlights from the year. And this could mean a number of different things. You may well ask, well, how am I going to figure out what are the highlights of my year? It could be some things which are stuck in your mind that, when you think about, well, what was the last year about? You can think about some important events which took place. It could be in the form of accomplishment, but it could be something that you think about. But other ways in which we can also think about what are the highlights of our year is that it could be through our smartphones. If it is that we are accustomed to taking photograph of important events or important times, it could be that we look through at our record of our gallery of pictures that we have taken, and this could help us to think about what we were able to accomplish. It could be, and when we talk about highlights, it could be low points, or it could also be high points. Um, And it could be, it could be that it was around certain events. It could be during Ramadan or during maybe one of the retreats that we had at Markfield, or it could be something else. But whatever it is, taking note and recording some of your highlights from the year is something, which is important. The second thing which I would suggest that you do is that ask yourselves what were some of the hardest parts of the year. And sometimes it could be something at work. It could be you were preparing for an assignment, for an exam, or something, but they were really hard parts of the year. And that's important because, and we don't just learn from the things which are easy, but also we learn from things which are hard. So, what were the hardest parts of the year? Once we begin that, sometimes we go through life and we feel as though we will not be able to maybe accomplish the goals that we would like to set out for ourselves because it seems so daunting and overwhelming. But yet at the end of it all, we seem to get through that hurdle. And that in itself helps us to be able to develop that willpower and that resilience to think about and to have that a toolbox for the future, inshallah. The next thing is to ask yourselves, what did you learn about yourself this year? So it's not about just about what you have accomplished, but it's also about the things that you've learned about yourself. Maybe you didn't realize that that you had that amount of courage that perhaps you felt that you were able to exhibit during the course of the year. Something came out, some particular skill set or some particular quality that you have, it came out when you least expected it. So what have you learned about yourself during the course of the year? It could be that you suddenly realize that you have been feeling in a particular way because of what you have been doing or the way that you have been engaging with others. And it's about trying to understand more about yourself. Now, the next couple of points which I wanted to start is something which is often used in the corporate world. In the corporate world, they use something which is called the stop, start, continue technique. And what that means is that they will ask themselves, what are you going to stop doing in the next year? In other words, if you think about a year, there are some things which when you look back and say, look, definitely, this type of behavior is something which I am definitely going to stop. This app, which I have been I'm becoming sort of addicted to, I'm definitely going to stop engaging with it. And that's something which is important. It begins with your stop in terms of some of the things that you want to rid yourself of. The second thing is that of what are you going to start doing? So there are stopping things, and then there is the idea of starting things. And here you're asking yourself, well, there is something which needs to change in my life. And the question is, what do I need to change? So what is something new which I'm going to start? And that's important to stop, start. And then there are some things which you have done and you have done them well during the course of the day. And those are the things you will say, what are the things which I'm going to continue during the next year? And the last point is about, well, if you've decided to do all of these things, you've taken stock, you've audited, you've decided what you're going to stop, what you're going to start, and what you're going to continue. Then the next point is, on what steps am I going to take now? Because in the science of goal setting, we know that unless you're able to empower yourselves and to begin immediately with what you've decided upon, it's unlikely that you will do so in the future. So it's important to be able to ask yourself what steps you're going to take now, inshallah. So that's the first part about auditing of the year. And I just wanted to stop here and ask anybody if they've tried some of these things or if they want to add to what I've mentioned already. Anybody? So just quickly, for those of you who came a bit late, we talked about the idea of wanting to plan for 2025. We've talked about this whole area of auditing and reflecting on our high moments, our low moments of the stop, start, continue technique and of taking action now. Does anybody have anything that they would like to add to this before we move on to the second part? No? Okay, so let's move on then. In this second part of this presentation, I wanted to look a little bit about goal setting. And this is something I've been looking at and in some of the previous manuals that we've produced for the IDEA programs, we have looked at it. But in this here, I wanted to look a little bit more in terms of, well, what does the science tell us? And what are some of the research papers from the different universities telling us about this whole area of goal setting? So goal setting is not something which is unique for what we might do or Muslims might do, but everybody is concerned about goal setting and wanting to achieve the things that they aspire towards. Um, and the first university I wanted to quote something from is from the University of Oregon Research, and this is from a researcher called Dr. Elliot Berkman. So Dr. Elliot Berkman, he was one of the professors there at the Center for Translational Neuroscience, and they have looked at this whole area of goal setting from a neuroscience insight. And what they have shown is that a number of different things. And two of the key findings that when we think about what a goal is, it constitutes, there are two important distinct components. And one, he says, he described as being the will and the we. In other words, the why and the what. And for Dr. Berkman, he defined this whole area of a goal as any desired outcome that wouldn't otherwise happen without you doing something about it. In other words, it's something which requires effort. If there is no effort, then it can't be considered to be a goal. And he goes on to talk about things like, for instance, if you suddenly said, well, look, I'm going to have dinner in 2 hours' time, that's not a goal. It might be something that you would like to do, and you will probably more than likely get it done, but it's something which you would routinely do, and it's not something that is going to take a significant amount of otherwise normal effort from you, and therefore it wouldn't be considered to be a goal, which is really important because when we think about this whole area that the Quran talks about in terms of amanu wa amilu salihat, we know that these two things are always coupled together. And the idea behind it is that, whatever it is that you set out or your belief or your habit always must come with action. Your belief must translate itself into something which is actionable. So action is something which is critical, and therefore, if it is that there is something you want to do and you are not prepared to give the effort which is required, then really ask yourself, is it a goal or is it just something which is part of a dream that you might have? The Quran uses another term. The Hadith uses the term niyyah, but the Quran also uses the term irada, and which is again, that sense of willpower that you should have in terms of doing what you want to do. Now, in this research from the University of Oregon, they looked at two important things, as I mentioned. And the first is the why. The why is something that you need to understand about your goal. If you don't understand your why, it may well be that you may not have the motivation and the zeal to be able to accomplish what you want to do. And from a neuroscience point of view, what they have sort of looked at the why as is that they say that the why engages what is known as a dopamine reward system. So we know that the dopamine reward system is the system that, sort of in a sense gives you your motivation to be able to do something. And unless you have this, it becomes difficult for you to begin to engage. And that why is really important. Now, we can extend that whole concept of why in terms of for our motivation when we think about the things that we need to do or the goals that we need to set ourselves, or in our case, the spiritual goals that we would like. Unless we can understand the why better, then it will become difficult. And the moment that we find some sort of challenge before us, we will well fall short of what we want to be able to accomplish, because that why is not there. The second thing that they speak about at the University of Oregon is that they talk about this whole idea of the how. And the how uses what they call the executive function of circuits, or part of what is known in front as the prefrontal cortex. And that is a part of the brain which sort of use a lot of the intellectual work is taking place. And that is what comes up with this whole area. But well, I understand the why, but how it is I'm going to do what it is I'm going to do, what are the tools and mechanisms and so on. This is where all of that takes place. So it's different parts of the brain which has been activated for the why and then for the how. I think understanding the science is will help us in a sense of realizing what a goal is in terms of the effort which is required, but also that understanding the why and understanding the how is critical. And if unless we can put all of these things together, then we will not be able to really generate the type of goals that we would like and that we can achieve. Now, the next part of it, what I wanted to look at is that I wanted to look at, well, what are some of the common reasons why people fail in terms of their goal setting, why they don't achieve what they want to achieve. And when you look at 2024 and you look at the results of people who reflect on what they were able to achieve during 2024, you would realize the vast majority of people who seem to set goals for themselves, they fail. And many who will set goals for 2025, they will also fail. So the question is, well, what are some of the common typical reasons why people fail, or the mistakes that they make in goal setting? So the first research I wanted us to look at is one which is taken from Florida State University research. And in their research, they looked at when people set goals, what they tend to do is that they tend to be very specific about what they want to be able to achieve. If it's a grade in a particular exam, they're very specific. That's what I want. If it's weight loss, they're thinking, well, look, I want to lose exactly 15 pounds or something like that. So that what they do is that they have a particular value in mind, and unless they can achieve that, then they fall short. What the research is suggesting is that what we should be doing is that we should be having a range in terms of our goal setting. And the range should be one which is not something which is too overwhelming and not something which is too easy. And the word that they use to describe it in the literature is a word called stretch. So you want goals that will stretch you to the point, but it will not break you. For those of you who understand, the curve, the stress strain curve, you would understand what I mean by that. So that you want to be able to be stretched to the point in where it's something which is motivating. It's not too easy for you. You have to put effort into it, but at the same time, it's not something which is so overwhelming that it's inconceivable that you will be able to achieve it. So find a range and suitable range for you to look at, inshallah. Once you find a range, what you would find is that your success rate in terms of what you want to achieve will become far more easy, inshallah, to attain. Okay, so that's from Florida State University research. The second set of research I wanted us to look at is one from the University of Chicago. And in the University of Chicago, there was an experiment that was conducted, which I found quite fascinating. And in this experiment, what they did is that they handed out to participants into different groups, into two different groups, loyalty cards, these sort of coffee shop loyalty cards that you can get. And some of our supermarkets have them as well. So they gave all these loyalty cards. Now, in one set of the loyalty cards, what they did is that they had a blank 10 stamp card. So 10 stamps, and then after you fill those 10 stamps, then you get your prize or whatever it is. It's like perhaps the Nando's card that some of us get sometimes. So that's one type of card that they had for one group. Now, the second group, they had a 12 stamp card, not 10, but 12. But in this 12 stamp card, two of the stamps were filled out, they were pre-filled. And they looked to find out, well, which ones will be filled out first, which ones is more likely to be filled out. And what they found was that the cards which had 12 stamps in it, even though it seemed to be more, but had two stamps pre-filled, was the one which was which was filled out first. People prefer that one. And what they looked at, and they described something from the research called artificial progress, which they describe as what the rule and the stamps pre-filled were fulfilling, completed. And if you have artificial progress, then this allow people to, in their brain, to be able to have that sense that they were actually completing something and they're actually doing it faster. So the principle is what they described as coming from this research as something called incremental illusion, where you're making initial progress appear easier, increasing motivation. In other words, it's like asking someone to do something which you know will test them. And what you do is that you show them, you do the very first bit of it for them, and then they say, well, look, this is the way it's on, get on with it or something like that, even though with the bit that you may have done is something which they were entirely capable of doing. But because there is a sense that you have done the first bit for them, giving you that incremental illusion, then it's easier for them to be able to continue. So that's something for us to think about. And what the research then tells us is that a lot of people, they need help, they need a little push in that direction. And once you get that push, then it makes it easier. If they try to do things just on their own without that, that stimulus, then it becomes a little bit more difficult for them. Okay, so that's the second research. The third research I wanted us to look at is one from Ohio State University. And at Ohio State University, they looked at something called goal sharing versus privacy. So what they did is that they had different cohorts of participants. In one cohort, they had participants who they set goals, but they did not declare those goals with those around them or with anybody else. It kept them just to themselves. The only people who knew what the goals were them. Whereas the second group, the goals that they set for themselves, they were allowed to share those goals and they articulated, what they wanted to achieve with others around them, and they shared. And what they were able to find is that those people who shared their goals would, firstly, it allowed them to articulate more about their goals. And also it because they shared their goals with people who admire them or people who had a certain sense of confidence in them, what it did is that it increased their commitment and their performance, because now they know that the only people who, in a sense, who know what it is that I want to do is not just me, but it's also my friends, others as well. And you see this sometimes among sports personalities when they declare, I'm going to win this game, or I'm going to win my race, or I'm going to win this fight, or what have you. And because they have declared it to the public, then it becomes then they have the commitment and the performance is heightened as an increase because they know that a lot of people will be let down if it is that they don't achieve what they want to be able to achieve. Now, this study is quite important because there was a previous study done at New York University in 2009. And in that university, their finding was the way to deal with goals is to keep it private. So this study from Ohio State University actually contradicted and actually showed that perhaps there is more to goal setting and than just keeping it to yourself. So this key distinction here is impact depends on who you tell, not whether you tell. And that's important. Um, you may well want to share your goals with others, but what they're saying is that, be particular who you share your goals with. In other words, if it's somebody who is, going to be Mr. Despondent, who is going to talk you down, who is not going to be somebody that you can that you can rely upon or help motivate you or help encourage you, then perhaps that's not the person to share it with. So be careful who you share what you want to share with. And that's where the impact is from. It's not about whether you share or not, but who do you tell and what do you see? So that's the interesting research on sharing versus privacy from Ohio State University. The next set of research I wanted to look at is one from University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine. And what they looked at is that they looked at this whole area of what is known timing of goal initiation. So what they did is that in this study is that they looked at different group of participants. And then for everybody, they set goals. But then for one group, what they wanted them to do was to take immediate action with their goals. And with the other group was to have a delay in when it is that they are meant to take action. And what they were able to show, as you would expect, is that the immediate action after goal setting leads to more significant change. In other words, you need to start immediately. And the way to do so, their recommendation was to take small steps immediately rather than waiting for what is known as the perfect timing. A lot of people, they fail in what they set out to do because they're working for the perfect time to do something. In other words, they're looking for that moment or that low moment or that high moment, or when I seem to have everything that I need before I embark on what it is that I want to do. But their finding was this, as far as timing is concerned, as soon as you have your goal, then you embark upon it. What's also interesting is that what they were also able to show is that very often we want to be able to make everything perfect before we do something. Rather than, we've done something, it seems to be good enough, let's just get on with it and do it. And that's really important for us to, because if you're looking for perfection in what it is that you do, then what you may well find is that perfection will never arrive. And you may well be, stalling in your way to goal setting and achieving what you want to achieve. Okay, so the next set of research we're going to look at now is from the University College at Riverside. What are some of the research that they did? So in their research, what they looked at is that they looked at this whole area of what is known as goal ambition levels. And their key finding was that goals need some ambition to maintain motivation. In other words, and this goes back to the point where we mentioned in one of the earlier research where we looked at this whole area of a range. So a goal has to have an element of ambition about it, going above and beyond. If you have that ambition, then you will be able to maintain that motivation. If there is no such ambition, then it becomes difficult to do so. So again, the key finding there was it must be achievable while requiring some sort of effort. Again, using that word which I talked about before, stretch. is something which we should think about. Okay, another university, German university research, and in one of these universities in Germany, what they looked at, can't remember exactly which one it was. They looked at the impact of overlying ambitious goals. Um, and what they were able to show, which is related again to the Riverside research, is that missing unrealistic goals damages your self-esteem. Um, and that's really important because you can set goals for yourself, but if they're too ambitious, if they're not achievable, and when you don't achieve them, then your self-esteem, instead of going up, goes down. And then the next time you have to set out to do something, you just don't want to do it because you don't feel that you've accomplished it, you don't feel that you have what it takes. So be careful about goal setting and looking at things which perhaps are too unrealistic. Um, okay, so the next university I wanted to go to was some research which was done at Columbia University. And this was done by one of the professors, and you can look at some of his papers. His name is Dr. Heidi Halverson. And what they looked at is that they looked at the question of goal specificity question. In other words, um, what will you know? How, and when will you know when you have succeeded? And that's important for us because sometimes we set goals for ourselves. Um, but how do we know when we have achieved that goal? In other words, um, the goal must be specific. In other words, it must be very clear and it must be, as much as it must be achievable, but it must be something which is measurable. So when will you know if you've succeeded? And that's the important tools here. So the idea is to transform your vague intentions into something which is measurable. And this is something I think for those of you who are familiar with the SMART goal setting technique, SMART does come in there. But again, this helps us understand some of the research behind the SMART. Okay, the next set of research I wanted to look at is one from Harvard University. And in Harvard University, they coined something which is called the arrival fallacy, which is very interesting because what the arrival fallacy is about is that this focuses on happiness and goal achievement. Now, many people, in the pursuit of their goal, they tend to believe that happiness, satisfaction, my achievement, my sense of purpose, what have you, all of that will come when I have achieved my goal. But what the research is showing is that achieving goals provide less satisfaction than pursuing them. And very often what happens is that when people actually achieve their goals, that's at that point in time, that's the point in time that almost there's a certain sense of depression which comes over them. And I can't remember the name of the book, but recently I read a book on happiness. And this was written by somebody who won Olympic gold, and he had achieved everything that he wanted to on the sports field. He got it. He won it. He had it. There was nothing else that he needed to do in the sports field. He was known. I mean, he got the recognition for what he did. But suddenly he found, and at the moment in which he achieved his goal, there was this sort of euphoric moment. And then that night, then everything suddenly is almost as if his world was falling apart. And the happiness that he thought that he would have found having achieved his goal, he felt that he didn't have it at all. In fact, he felt totally opposite. Yes, he had won, but yes, that sense of tranquility, that happiness, what he wanted, satisfaction, wasn't there. There was a sense of emptiness. And this research of the arrival fallacy from Harvard University is really important for us here, because what this tells us, it is not in terms of when you have achieved it, but rather the happiness and the satisfaction comes is in the pursuit of the goal itself. So pursuit rather than the achievement is what creates lasting happiness. And that's why, as much as you want to achieve things, don't just focus upon the end, but also focus upon and enjoy the moment while you're doing what it is that you're doing. So if you're writing, if you're reading, if you're studying, whatever goals that you set for yourself, if you have set yourself a goal, let's say in your salah to increase the quality of your prayer, then it's not about coming to a point where you feel that you found that euphoric way of doing something. That's not, but it's about the effort that you're making. You should enjoy that moment while you're doing so, because it's in the effort that you put out is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is looking at. So I'm gonna just summarize some of the key points that I've mentioned from these different research papers. So collectively, we think about goal settings. So the first one is that clear personal motivation. Always understand the why before you decide to do what you want to do. The second one is to have specific action plans. In other words, understand the how about how you're going to get it done. That's important. Um, be realistic, but have challenging targets, immediate action steps you need to take. A strategic sharing with supportive people, and that's important. So it's strategic. You don't necessarily share everything of your goals, but strategic sharing, but with people who will be supportive of you, rather than because sometimes you may share things with others, and they set out just to undermine you in what it is that you want, trying to ensure that what it is that you want to achieve, you will not achieve, because they will act as an obstacle in your way. Sometimes it happens at work and it happens in other places, but something to think about. And the last point is that focus on progress rather than just achievement.